Hey everybody. Hopefully you're joining me again. Um, and hopefully the stream is working. I see everything seems to be working the way it should, although I don't know about my internet right now. We had an internet problem. Earlier I was trying to watch the live stream of the Johnson Prairie service and it had a few hiccups, although we were able to watch it. It was really good. Yeah. So hi Laura, how are you? I think that's you, Sharon. This is a test. I think I see you too. So let me see if the chat here is open. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to start here in just a minute. I'll wait and see if a few more people get on before we get going. But I hope you guys are doing well in the midst of this pandemic and everybody kind of sheltering inside. It's been interesting. Um, I normally do this for work once a week, but this morning I used my personal Gmail account and I had to get the streaming set up for that. And I did a test the other night and everything worked, but then this morning something was not the same. So couldn't figure that out, but I got to figure it out afterwards. Um, anyway, so thanks for joining earlier today and then for coming back today, later today. Or you tend to get anxious about your daughter's health. I get that. Yeah. We always worry about our children. Um, but anyway, it's 2 o'clock, so I say get started at 2. So let's start talking about this. Again, the topic is anxiety in difficult times, and there's difficult times for all of us at different times. A lot of times they're individual, so we're dealing with something that's happening to us, maybe more so than other people. But right now it's kind of a worldwide thing that we're going through. So in this case, it's COVID-19. We never know what it might be, whether it's an individual issue that we have or something more global like we're seeing right now. But in any event, kind of what we need to do is the same in any situation, which would be to look to God for the answers and to get our peace from Him. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Um, these are some of the things, finances, that's true, Sharon. So these are some of the things. And what's interesting is, I had this list. I've taught on this before, and I had this list from last time. And as I looked at the list now with this perspective of a pandemic, it's amazing how many things are impacted by what we're going through right now. Basically, just pretty much everything on this list, it's all kind of like this perfect storm of anxiety that people have to deal with here. So we've got our health, right? And obviously in a pandemic, that's something that you worry about, whether you're going to get sick, who else is sick, and you're going to get sick from them. Our job, for a lot of people, I'm blessed because I can work at home. I'm not in the service industry or anything like that, but there are people that, in service industries, restaurants, work in banks, work in health clubs, work in salons, those kinds of things, that really right now in that particular situation, they can't work, and a lot of them are being furloughed, laid off, fired in some cases, although sometimes they're firing the people so that it's easier for them to get unemployment. So hopefully they'll be rehired. And it sounds bad, but in some cases they're doing it for good reasons. But again, that's something that we're dealing with right now. It's an anxiety that a lot of people have right now. Is my job safe? If I'm laid off, am I going to be able to come back? Am I going to be laid off or fired? The state of the world, obviously, this is a pandemic and it's affecting the whole world. So you can add that to this: war, terrorism, politics, the economy, pandemic. And let's go back to the economy. That's another thing that people are fearful of right now because of everything that we're having to do. All these businesses shuttering, or trimming back the number of people that are working. What impact is that going to have on the economy? So that's another concern that we have. Disasters, I guess you can just add this to the list. This is a disaster in a sense: hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, pandemics. Our children, Laura, you mentioned this. So yeah, we worry about our children. What's interesting with this pandemic is, in this particular virus, is children and young people are less impacted than older people or compromised individuals. So obviously, if you have a child whose health is compromised in some way, that's still a concern. But for the most part, children, especially babies, children, young people, don't seem to be very much impacted by this. So that's one thing here that we can maybe worry less about, although we're always worried about our kids, and we'd be worried if they got sick regardless of whether they were going to be at high risk for anything really serious. We'd still be worried about that. And then, of course, dying. Enough said about that. So again, it's a pandemic, and there are people dying from this. So again, this is another concern. So all of these things, again, are coming together in what we're seeing right now. But all of these things tend to be things that we're anxious about anyway. We're usually anxious about all of these things at one point or another, maybe not all at the same time. So again, that's why this one's particularly difficult. This is interesting because, again, there's some people that handle anxiety, or not, maybe they're not anxious as much, or they handle things about worry better. So this is a quote from Dr. David Jeremiah that I like. For many people, worries become so ingrained in their personalities that once the old worries are gone, they search for new ones. They become dependent on worry as a lens through which to view life, and they've forgotten any other way to live. So, that's something where the lens that we want to look through life is not through worry. We want to look through it again through more from God's perspective and His plans for our life and what He's doing, and maybe what we can learn from what we're going through. Be confident that things are going to work out the way that God wants them to work out. So but unfortunately, a lot of people are in this situation where they can stop worrying about something and then they'll replace it with something else. So when this pandemic is over, there will be new worries for those folks. They'll find something else that will kind of consume that. So that's this person here. I worry too much, and that worries me. So, again, that would be, some people will say that telling somebody who is like this not to worry is like telling somebody who has anorexia just to eat. So, it's not, it's just the way the person looks at the world. Again, it's that lens that they look through the world. And that's what needs to change if you're somebody like that. And I don't know if there's anybody else on here. Yeah, worry becomes a habit. Sharon, you're right, it does. It's like anything. It's kind of like if you, what is it, the wolf that you feed? If you feed that constantly, then that becomes kind of the way that you live. It's like a rut that you get stuck in. Your brain kind of gets stuck in that rut where it's hard to get out of that worry in a situation like that. So we want to remember again where to put our focus, and it's not inside. It's not inside us, but it's out to God. Oops. Oh, I forgot to put on my microphone. I knew I forgot something this morning. So this may make the audio better. Let's put this right here, and we'll just stick that right there. Hopefully that's better. All right. So. Again, here's let's turn to Scripture, and here's where really our focus should be. So this is out of Matthew chapter 6. Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more important than food, and the body more important than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? So Jesus starts here with the word therefore. So when Jesus, or anywhere in Scripture, when you see that, you see therefore, that means they're referring to something that they just said, or that he had just said. So in this case, the paragraph or so before this, he's talking about how you can only serve one master. You can't serve two masters. And he's saying you can't serve God and money. And that's why the focus of this is on, how are you going to, what are you going to eat and drink and clothes and those kinds of things. But it really applies to other kinds of things. So we can't serve God effectively if we are focused on something else. The whole point is, what's your focus? Are you focused on God? Is that who you're focused on? Or are you focused on money? Or are you focused on God? Or are you focused on worry or anxiety? Or are you focused on all of those things? Because if you're focused on all of those things, it's really hard to turn toward God and to look to Him to provide some comfort. And so, in a way, it applies to just about anything like this. So, and he's not, when he says don't worry, he's not saying don't be prepared. He's not saying, live day to day. So it doesn't mean we shouldn't make plans for the future. It doesn't mean we shouldn't take, steps, that would be appropriate, let's say in this pandemic, to make sure that we're safe. Washing your hands, trying to keep space between people, those kinds of things. So that's all important. It's not saying, well, just go out to, like they're doing right now down in spring break. Just go out, have a good time, it doesn't matter. It's not that. It doesn't mean we shouldn't take precautions for this or any other kind of thing. But there is a difference. So we're kind of, I want to talk about the difference between worry and concern. And they're very different. I love this, the way it is characterized here because it's very visual. Concern embodies embracing the proper mindset for caring about important issues, decisions, events, or conditions. It also means taking proper steps to create effective solutions, monitoring their outcomes, and making changes or modifications where necessary. Worry, on the other hand, is a cyclic process of rumination moving in a circular pattern, eschewing resolution. When we're concerned, we wade into the shallow end of the pool first to test the waters. When we're worried, we merely circle the pool, staring into the abyss, pondering what the water feels like, never taking the plunge. Worry is draining and saps energy. Concern is positive and fuels energy. Worry invites runaway stress. Concern ushers in emotional intelligence. So if you think about it that way, concern is really the reasoning part of the brain. That's the part of the brain where you're looking at something logically and you're kind of analyzing the situation, the problem, and then you determine what steps you need to take. If you can take steps. Sometimes you can't take steps, and it's important to recognize that as well. And I think when you're using that part of the brain, you realize that, and you do what you can, and you leave the rest really up to God, the stuff that you can't really change. Worry is more from the emotional or maybe the irrational part of the brain. It's a part of the brain we all have, but we need to, in a situation like this, we need to really switch to more the reasoning part of the brain and not the part that worries so much. Here's a few more differences between worry and concern. Worry distracts us. Concern focuses us. So, when you're worried, it's really hard to focus. When you're concerned or when you're trying to plan, then you're really focused on what the solution is. Worry disables planning, same thing. Concern helps us to plan. Worry blurs our vision. Concern clarifies our purpose so we can see what it is that we need to do. Worry tends to give up. And then, sometimes it's like, well, I can't do anything because you kind of shut down. And then concern perseveres. So if you are looking at something rationally and also, thinking that God is there with you, then you can have the perseverance that you need to be able to get through that. That's really difficult to do if you're on the worry side of things. But if you're more planning and concerned and looking at the issue and realizing that God is there with you, then you can actually persevere through things. Worry exaggerates. A lot of times worry is looking at the worst case scenario and lots of what if thinking. What if this happens? What if that happens? And you work on down the line till it's the absolute worst case scenario. But concern is really going to be more pinpointing what the issue is right now. Realizing again, when your concern is based on what you're seeing and logically looking at the situation, then your concern may go a little further down the line if you're looking at the facts and realize, well, this could lead to that, and we really need to be preparing for that. So it's a little different there. And then worry focuses on self. It's very inward, worrying about, how is this going to impact me? Whereas concern a lot of times will be focused on others. And that's especially the case, again, if you bring God into the picture, because God is going to want you to focus on others as well on situations like this. So, yeah, you're right, Laura. So God is in control, and we need to remember that. If he's not in control, then, then we have real big problems. But he is, so thankfully we're not. So I thought it was interesting. I didn't get a chance actually to watch the sermon this morning before when I tried to do this earlier, and then it was broken. But I got to watch it afterward, and I thought it was interesting because it all, it kind of dovetailed into this lesson. I thought it might. But I thought this was really good when Clay in the sermon brought up this particular passage. He's doing a sermon called A Living Hope, or Living Hope. And it's based on 1 Peter 1:13. And in this particular verse, 1 Peter chapter 1. In this particular verse, 1:13, he says, "Therefore, prepare your minds for action. Be self-controlled. Set your hope on the grace to be brought to you when Jesus Christ is revealed at his coming." So, well, first of all, there's a therefore. So again, we're looking at what Peter is saying here, and he's talking about something earlier, which is basically the first part of the chapter 1. So again, this is he's writing a letter to the church, and this is a church that has been exiled or that is already under persecution at this point that he's writing this. So they are not in Jerusalem. They're various parts of Asia and whatnot, and they're under persecution. So he's writing this letter as encouragement. So that's what the therefore is. So he's saying, you're having to go through this, and therefore prepare your minds for action. So that's just like we were just talking about with concern. When you're concerned about something, you want to be prepared for action. If you're worried and anxious, it'll be hard to be prepared. And be self-controlled. Again, that's part of using your mind, activating your mind that can help you there. Set your hope on the grace to be brought to you when Jesus Christ is revealed at his coming. So again, we're going to count on God to be there for us both here, and then also we have that hope, that living hope, that will be with Jesus forever, and we have that eternal hope, as well as the hope that right now, through this situation, whatever we're going through, whether this passes through and 6 months from now we're worried about something else, we still have that hope in Jesus. So this last verse should stick out at us because it's very important. So, can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? Again, this is the last verse that we just read from Matthew a minute ago. So that's true. Can we, if you're looking at it from a concern point of view or a preparation point of view, then yeah, you can make a difference, right? Because we do things all the time to be able to live longer and those kinds of things. So there's things that we do all the time. We don't let our kids run out in traffic. We don't, in the middle of a thunderstorm, try to play golf in our cleats, golf shoes or whatever, or just even go out in a thunderstorm and stand under a tree. We don't right now go to a place where there's lots of people gathering because there's a possibility that somebody may be sick and we might get that. So there's different things that we do. But by worrying, you don't add a single day to or hour to your life. It basically, what Jesus is saying here is worry is an exercise in futility. It's not going to do anything for us. There's no positive effect. In fact, it only has negative effects, and that worries people who worry, right? So it could have a negative effect on your health, a negative effect on your physical as well as your spiritual health and your psychological health. So it doesn't help us at all. So planning is time well spent, but worry is wasted time is what it comes down to. And it's interesting here that, it says, can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? So you might say, well, wow, then I shouldn't worry about my health, and I shouldn't worry about whether I go out in public with a lot of people right now, or I shouldn't worry about eating right, exercising. Well, no, you're not going to add a single hour to your life because God knows in advance everything that you're going to do, and you have an appointed number of days, and that appointed number of days will be longer probably if you exercise and eat right than it will be if you don't. But it's appointed right now. So, God's going to know at some point that you're going to go out and exercise and eat right, and at some point you're going to die. But you can. It's your choice. We have free will to do what that is, but God knows what that choice is in advance. So, again, planning is good, but worrying about all of that stuff is not. So let me pull this up here a minute. So not such a good way to look at it. Worry accomplishes nothing. Absolutely, yeah. Sharon, we cannot be worrying. Medical professionals say that worry can harm our health, possibly reducing our lifespan. Again, that's true, and that worries worriers. So today is the day that anybody who's worrying out there, and I know it's hard because again I can't say stop worrying because again that just doesn't work. But what I can say is look to God as your peace, as your hope. So you want to switch from that worry brain, that emotional, kind of the irrational part, the fight or flight kind of brain. That's kind of the brain that we that helps us in certain situations when we really need it, right? Because you really do need that part of the brain when you're under attack and you've got that fight or flight kind of thing. You need that response kind of the brain, but the rest of the time we want to be working from the rational side of the brain instead of that emotional kind, that emotional side. So I thought this was an interesting quote from Billy Graham.
Historians will probably call our era the age of anxiety. Anxiety is the natural result when our hopes are centered in anything short of God and His will for us. So think about that. That's 55 years ago, is that right? So different anxiety back then than we have now. There might have been, anxiety about a pandemic. I don't know. I know there was something going on. There was something going on around 1965. Who knows? Maybe it was that. I think there was. That might have been the first H1N1 pandemic. I don't know if it was a pandemic, but there was something going on there because there were some people in 1965 for the H1N1 pandemic that took place back in 2009. There were some people, actually it was reversed back then, so in that particular, at that particular time in 2009, that was a pandemic. I don't know if you realize that. So there was a pandemic in 2009. It was H1N1, and it was the reverse of what we have now because there were people who were alive in 1965, and it was also 1918, so there weren't too many people alive then, but there were people alive in 1965 when a variation of that virus went around who had some immunity. So people, and there were others that were older that had immunity. So that one actually was attacking younger people. So very few people, mostly people under 65 died from that one. This one's kind of the reverse. So maybe he was talking about that, I don't know, or just anything else. But there were obviously different things to be anxious about then than there are now. And that's always going to be the case. There's always going to be, I think, an age of anxiety for all of us. We need to realize that. Again, I want to kind of close with this. So this is another verse from Philippians here. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. So we're to pray, right? So we're to pray, we're to ask by prayer and petition, and we're to be thankful. So those are all good things to do anytime we pray, but when we're in the midst of fear, anxiety, that's a perfect thing to pray. You want to be thankful even in the midst of that, for just for the fact that we can pray to God, we can talk to God. We want to be thankful for that. We want to be thankful that God works out all things for good for those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. So we can be thankful for the fact that whatever it is that we're undergoing, that God is going to work it out for good, either in our lives or for His kingdom. And we should be thankful for that regardless. And He will guard our hearts and our minds. The peace of God will enter our hearts. And that's really important because that's the only way we're going to get peace. We're not going to get peace through trying to fix it on our own. We can't fix everything. We have to leave things up to God. And while we can take steps, again, to be cautious, to take precaution in things, we really have to leave the results up to God. So anyway, Hong Kong flu. Yeah, that may be, Sharon. May have been the Hong Kong flu back then, which it's funny now that that was not politically incorrect back then, but I guess today saying that the flu came from China would be politically correct or politically incorrect. So again, if you didn't get a chance to see the sermon this morning from Clay Smith, this is Johnson Ferry's service, you can probably replay it now, but the new series is called Living Hope, and it's available at 8:30, 9:50, or 11:15 a.m. on Sundays, and you can get that at contemporary.johnsonferry.org. Also, I think traditional.johnsonferry.org. I put the contemporary down here because watching it this morning, I watched both the music from both, and I think from the perspective of watching it on television without a choir in the background, and maybe an audience there, I don't know if that makes a difference, but it just seemed like the contemporary was a better fit for TV. So if you're going to be streaming that, contemporary was very good. And then on Facebook Live as well, facebook.com/Johnson Ferry. So let me go back here. So that's interesting, Sharon, or Jay actually in this case. Fallout shelters, I remember that. I don't know about you guys, but yeah, I was alive in 65. I was 5 years old. And I remember my dad got some kind of letter from the government that said, you should be building a fallout shelter. And I thought that was crazy. My dad was really mad about it. He's like, I'm not going to, he had just finished doing something. We had a basement. He had just finished doing some kind of big major project. And he's like, I'm not building a fallout shelter. But yeah, I remember that. So there was a lot of fear back then in '65 or so. That certainly may have been that, because it might have been a few years later, I don't remember. But yeah, that was something that was going on then. So anyway, thanks for joining me. I will, for those of you in class, I will send you an email as to my plan for next week and whether we'll do it this way again, or maybe we'll try Zoom, where we can actually all kind of be on at the same time. If you don't mind getting up and having your face seen on Sunday morning, where you're not actually getting out of the house. So anyway, I'll get your thoughts on that. But thanks for joining me. You can watch this back. This will be recorded immediately on the same YouTube link, like just a minute or two after this is over. So, thanks, Laura. Thanks for being patient and coming back. I appreciate that. Thank you guys, and we'll do this again. So, you guys take care, and we'll talk at you later. If there's anything you need, let me know. If there's anything I can pray for, let me know. So just send me an email. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.